The sun began to rise over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the small town. Was it the end of a long night or the beginning of a new day? Short stories like this, where the end wraps into the beginning, have always interested me. In their raw simplicity, they seem to read like little riddles to life itself. Speaking of life, what if I were to ask you, have you ever met a person who has died? What if I told you that I am one of them? Now, before you start crossing yourself or fleeing from the room, what if I even went further to say, so are all of you? Oftentimes, we have a singular definition of death. Merriam-Webster defines it literally as the loss of life. But we all have experienced an end. Maybe it was a job, a relationship, a film that had you on the edge of your seat, or even a past version of yourself. Today, I want to talk to you about the power of these sometimes inevitable endings, how they look, and what we can do to prevent these experiences from holding us hostage as they come and go. We all know Steve Jobs, a prolific pioneer and creative director, an innovative mind of our time who met his own untimely end. One of my favorite quotes come from the moment he realized what was ahead of him. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is one of the most important tools I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. When I first read this, it spoke to me in a way that felt oddly familiar. This brilliant individual looking back on life from a grave vantage point. No matter when it happens, I truly believe that looking back in our stories help us to understand ourselves and where we are going. I was born in Laos, Vientiane, Laos, in 1994, to a Laotian man and a Vietnamese woman. My mother's family fled to Laos to escape the harsh aftermath of the Vietnam War. There, she met my father, the youngest of 3 sons of a wealthy woman. The rose-colored simplicity of our childhoods are often plastered with moments of paradise. I remember rarely being alone, surrounded by my family and a host of individuals caring for us. My family structure was not perfect, but let's be honest, whose really was? My parents did their best, and for that, I'm thankful. My father worked at a brewery, so it was not uncommon for him to come home after throwing back a few. One night, he took my sibling and I out for a ride. Excitedly, we ran to hop on the moped, and in passing, I pointed out an ice cream stand. Dad, ice cream, I said, pointing eagerly. My father nodded and made a turn to get us what we asked for. And in a split second, we're struck by an oncoming vehicle, throwing us from the bike and hurling us to the ground. It was as if time stopped. Lights flashed and went black again. I returned to my senses, surrounded by eyewitnesses in the area, to find my father lying face down in the road. He was hospitalized and later pronounced dead from a brain injury. Just like that, he was gone. I was 6, too young to recognize the gravity of the situation. Seeing my father's death occur right before my eyes was my first vivid lesson in endings. It felt as if the hurt was eased with time, but I now understand that loss changes you. It never really goes away, and the remedy is to learn to live beyond it. Life and death move together in time, like next-door neighbors, part and parcel of one another. But in all its sadness, honestly, it taught me a sense of urgency, something I would never forget. Time doesn't stop. We can't control when or where these things will happen, but what we can control are our responses to them. Will they freeze us in place or catapult us into action? Not long after my father's passing, my mother had the opportunity to move to America. Her leaving my brother and I was another shock for me. But just 3 years later, we would join her, thus ending our lives back in Laos, and along with it, everything that made sense to us. So, in this new place, this new world, we had to keep moving forward. You probably heard of Yerkes and Dodson's study on comfort zone, which explained how the end of familiarity triggers psychological shift that could be opportunities for growth or regression. But just in case, I'll briefly explain the 3 zones and their effects on the mind and body. First, there's the comfort zone. This is where we experience low level of stress and anxiety. But as the name so aptly explained, we feel most comfortable. Hopefully similar to how you feel right now. Can everyone do me a favor? You don't have to close your eyes or anything like that. I want us to try our best to bring up an image in our minds. You're sitting in your living room on a Sunday morning in your favorite spot, reading a book or watching one of those old reruns you've seen 1,000 times, chuckling along like it was the first. How do you feel at that moment? Probably much different than how you feel when you're at a new place, in a part of town you're not so familiar with, or with associates or coworkers with whom you aren't particularly close. This is the second zone, known as the stretch zone. It can be characterized by slightly heightened anxiety and uncertainty, but altogether manageable with a bit of guts and practice. But when, like you're plunged into entirely new situations with no preparation and no former knowledge or friends, is known as the stress zone. This is where many people can panic, the body tenses, and anxiety soars. If I could have snapped my finger and been back in my small pond, oh, trust me, I would have. But I, nor none of us, are truly ever able to go back. We have to adjust, even if it means relearning what living is all together. Time doesn't stop. Seeing America for the first time was every bit of the word culture shock. That's what they call it. I didn't know what to make of it, but I had no choice but to adjust to my new life. There I was, surrounded by kids who looked nothing like me, with 0 English skills to my name. As the only Asian, I knew I stood out, so I began to develop a talent for observing others and mimicking how they behave, to no avail. So many kids get bullied in their early years, and I was no exception. I pretended like it didn't bother me, pretended it wasn't real, but between my father and country being taken from me, my mother's hectic business, and add that along to my charming new school life, to no surprise, I was desperately unhappy. I always knew that there was something different about me that ran deeper than everything. I wonder if the kids in my school could sense it. But still, I did the best that I could in the stress zone. I moved forward and tried to fit in. Who among us hasn't changed something to fit in? Or perhaps it's not fitting in so much as it is fitting around. Either way, there has to be some ends of ourselves to even imagine starting anew. Have you ever looked around and noticed that we find answers in the strangest places? The answers to the questions we haven't quite formulated yet are all around us. Well, that's because our hearts know what we're after, even if our conscious minds have yet to realize. Summers were my reprieve. a moment to this new country to spend in solitude. I spent most of my time watching Thai movies that I burned onto CDs to keep myself entertained while my mother was at her nail salon. Out of the bunch, there was one in particular that I enjoyed the most. It was called Beautiful Boxer. From the name, I imagine it to be a classic slugfest, a beat 'em up boxing story, but in reality, it was an autobiography about a renowned boxer in Thailand who fought their way into fame and fortune. I've always felt different, and that film reminded me that life is full of possibility. It's been said that the body keeps score, that it knows, even when we deny it, it knows the truth. As human beings, we're tribal creatures. We desperately want to be loved and accepted by our families and social groups. But at 14, I had done all the fitting in that I was able to muster. I couldn't do it anymore. So, despite the fear of judgment from my peers and my family and the potential repercussion in society, I found myself staring at the face of another inevitable end. It appeared like a fork in the road. The first option was to end this life forever, and the second, to end this life as I know it. You know that film I mentioned, Beautiful Boxer? It wasn't just about fighting for fame and fortune. It was about fighting to fund the protagonist's transition into who they always knew themselves to be. So, at 14, I made the terrifying decision to begin my transition. Was I not adorable? My mother should be proud. Yeah. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. No, not medically or surgically, in the way that some state legislatures are so afraid of. I wasn't going under the knife because being transgender is so much more than that. For many of us, especially in the beginning, it's a mental shift that aligns the spirit with this body. Even still, it was one of the hardest choices I ever had to make. It was an ending, sure, but one that I chose for myself. All this time I spent being defined by my past, but in those moments, as terrifying as they were, I made a startling discovery. And perhaps, as I mentioned abruptly at the beginning of this talk, I stumble upon the power of letting unnecessary aspects of myself die in order to make rooms for part of myself that were dying to live. Beginnings and ends come like mornings and evenings. And with as little control as we have over when they occur, what we are able to control is how we prepare for them and the actions we take as they form over the course of our lives, over and over again. That's the power I came to speak with all of you about today. We may be different in that I found myself in many ways through my transition, but wholly, we both share the same base level human experience. The complexity of our own upbringing and the happenings that shape our habits, thoughts, feelings, opinions, and perceptions of ourselves and the world around us. Time is finite. I paid the price in years of going against so much opposition to become who I am. I was disowned, rejected, and misunderstood. A convenient add-on to my journey, but a price that I will not pay is the price of denying my own evolution. Sometimes it can seem much easier not to express ourselves. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down, they say. All of our choices, no matter how minuscule or profound, come with a before and an after, an ending to what was. There are little endings waiting to surprise us. The end of a cherished relationship, the end of the stay in your hometown, the end of an identity. In seeing these endings for what they are, we allow ourselves to change and grow. And perhaps more importantly, we find the compassion to allow growth and change in others. And this matters because we only have so much time here on earth. The excitement of our lives lies just on the other side of what may seem to be like a painful end. But if there's one thing I would love for you to walk away with today, is to reframe those ends and see them for what they are, simply changes. You see, we humans were designed for change, designed for transformation from young to old. Evolution is in our DNA. So, considering that, our lives are simple. We only have to continue moving and let our hearts guide us beyond the unknown. To go against change is to fight a losing battle. And what's the use in that? The time is now. Living in fear of the inevitable is an exercise in futility. Look in anticipation towards every beginning that belongs to you and embrace from the bottom of the indomitable human spirit every ending that we cannot stop from coming. The end.